The New York City Food Policy Center at Hunter College presented the seminar on climate change, food, and health, from analysis to action to protect our futures, as part of our Fall 2014 Food Policy for Breakfast seminar series. The event provided a space to discuss how we can take action to ensure that food supplies and health in New York City and around the world are protected.
The climate trends suggest much more negative impacts on agriculture than positive ones. So when we look at rising temperature, one of their main concerns is falling yields by and large for some of the key crops that have become staple crops. And we might discuss why are these staple crops. That might be a separate discussion for crops like corn, wheat, and rice. Now, some parts of the world in the far north, you look at Greenland, parts of Russia in the far north, may well improve yields because of rising temperatures, but by and large, there's a growing real concern.
The continent's largest food distribution center in the South Bronx. 13,000 trucks travel into and out of Hunts Point daily, which contributes to exacerbated asthma in the local community, but also makes the center highly vulnerable to traffic disruptions in storm like sand. A third of the Hunts Point market is at risk of flooding because it's within the 100-year floodplain. And by the end of the century, the 100-year floods will be arriving roughly every decade to 20 years. And so, because Hunts Point is vulnerable to flooding, it's a significant infrastructure problem in the food system. But also, Hunts Point supplies a disproportionate share of food to low-income neighborhoods throughout the city, smaller markets. And so the impacts of the flood there would be disproportionately affected in communities with some of the sparsest retail food options.
And one of the theories of change was that we need to engage with people and policymakers at the regional level, and that's often the best way to make change. As we see in Washington, sometimes, particularly now, it's so difficult to get national work. I think you could argue that regional and local change is where the action is.
And the classic solution to market failures is active government. That's the role of government, to correct market failures. So I think the long-term solution to the failure of the food industry to produce healthy, affordable food for our population or for the global population is for government to return to the plate, to do its job, which is to protect the public.
This interactive seminar, held at the CUNY Graduate Center, allowed scholars, faculty, and members of the community to present inquiries, ideas, and concerns regarding food and climate change in New York City.
How is sustainability and food advocates can we sort of tackle these big industries that are working kind of in the opposite direction?
And as far as food regulations, we need to follow those, and it's very difficult with some of the vendors we use. It's really very difficult.
Eating less meat to doing less meat, better meat. I think fundamentally one of the questions that we need to address is how do you change the way people eat?
Some of the data points I mentioned earlier are very preliminary assessments of even where the food is coming from in New York City and how it's moving through the city. You know very little about food movement in New York City, even though it's such a critical infrastructure. So we need more research on how food is moving around the city. And the city just led a request for proposals to do some of that research. So I think there's progress there.
Diets need to be more sustainable globally, from a health perspective, from an environment, from a climate perspective. That's even part of an IPCC report, this Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I think we're just trying to figure out how do we do that. You know, education is one thing, but obviously there's a huge structure in place. Someone mentioned here the food industry that has, set up the system as it is with the help of governments. And there are a lot of levels to that. So I do think public education is important, but I think then people have to have access to healthier foods, greener foods.
For more information, visit nycfoodpolicy.org.